Have you ever wanted to own something that no one can take away from you? Have you ever wanted to have that one thing that you can have for eternity? Have you ever wanted to own property that you can be able to pass on to your children when you're gone? Ownership of property to infinity. Well, the new regulations on extension and renewal of leases in Kenya enable you to do just that. The new regulations have been set on Section 13 of the Land Amendment Act of 2016, and they basically seek to prevent you from losing property, to prevent a lessee, a government lessee, either from the national government or the county government. Any person who owns land that is leased from the county government or the national government is prevented from losing the property based on reallocation of property due to failure to renew or extend your lease period, probably because you were not aware that your lease had expired. This therefore enables transparency in the process of reallocation of government land. So unless your land is one in which the government is interested in acquiring compulsorily, because the government, the state always has the right to escheat or the right to own all property. So if the government is not compulsorily paying for your land or compulsorily looking to acquire your land, then you have every right to be able to stay on that property and be able to pass it on. So now let's take a sneak peek into the new regulations on extension and renewal of leases. Let's begin with preemptive rights. The new regulations recognize preemptive rights, which is basically a new introduction, preemptive rights of a landowner. This is basically the first right in case of government allocation of land. Now, this preemptive right only applies to citizens, Kenyan citizens, and not non-citizens. Now, the second introduction by the new regulations, and what they point out so clearly, is that the National Commission, the National Land Commission, reserves presumptive rights. Now, these are basically the rights to notify a leaseholder of expiry of their lease. And they have to do this 5 years prior to the expiry. And this enables you enough time to be able to apply for extension of your lease. And this is a wonderful provision. This is good news for everyone who owns property in Kenya, being able to be notified by the commission to be able to renew your lease. And now let's go to the application process for renewal and extension of leases. Basically, same old, same old. The application process begins by an application from the landowner, of course, to the commission to have their lease extended or renewed. And this application is often forwarded to the cabinet secretary for approval. And now the new regulations introduce something new, in that now it is required that the commission maintains a serialized register where all applications are entered. Application for renewal of leases, for extension of leases are entered. And this is good news, because the only thing you require for your application to be entered into the register is your personal ID and a passport photograph in case of an individual, and the certificate of incorporation in case of a company, and in case there are any letters of administration involved, those will also be called for. So let's talk about approvals. Basically, approvals now, as required under the new regulations, is that there has to be consultation between the experts and the national and county government. So, of course, the decision to either decline or renew your lease or extend your lease will be issued by either the national government or the county government, depending on where your leasing came from, or who leased you the land, or who is your lessor under the title that you hold. So being able to obtain a decision from the board, from the national government, on whether or not your lease has been extended or not extended, enables you to know the next process to take, because now the new regulations allow for appeals. This is great. This is quite a democracy, if you ask me. You're allowed to appeal to the commission in case the county government or the national government has declined to renew or to extend your lease. This is great. So once you apply to the board, of course, you'll be able to know the consequences of your disease. Once you apply to the commission, you'll be able to know the consequences of your final, of their final decision. So now, are there any shortfalls in these new laws, these new regulations? Well, definitely. Let's begin with even the root of the regulations. You see, the regulations are based on Section 13 of the Land Amendment Act. But remember, back in 2016, late 2016, the Law Society of Kenya at Malindi moved to court to seek expungement of certain sections of the Land Amendment Act for being unconstitutional. Indeed, they received a conservatory order which declared unconstitutional certain sections of the Land Amendment Act. And Section 13, on which the new regulations are based, is one of those sections that were declared unconstitutional. So basically, the new regulations seem to be based on a dwindling provision of law. So other than this, the fact that the new regulations recognize extension and renewal of leases, but do not recognize transactions that involve subdivisions and amalgamations is a cause to worry, because subdivisions and amalgamation procedures often go hand in hand with extension and lease renewal, and this is going to be a concern because they're not covered under the new regulations on extension and renewal of leases. Well, other than that, we are hopeful that the new regulations will enable you to hold property for as long as you would wish and for as long as you'd want to pass them on to your beneficiaries. Thank you for watching. This is the future.